Okay, so back at it again, at least temporarily. Yeah, because apparently spoiler season never ends. Someone please tell Wizards to slow down. Okay, just take your time, Wizards. We don't need spoiler season every week. But yeah, we're back at it because, brand new Urza, the very first Planeswalker version of Urza. Yeah, it's a very spicy, very powerful card. Perhaps the most powerful Planeswalker ever. But don't leave to check out that episode just yet, because on this episode, we've got yet another exciting Brothers War spoiler. And with this one, it happened. It finally happened. To find out, well, first in the comments, blame Eddie, because it's always Eddie's fault, not mine. The, insane amount of spoiler seasons back to back to back. And of course, any mistakes I make on this episode, blame Eddie in the comments below. And also thank you, Eddie, for your help. Anyways, let's jump into it. So, we finally have a usable Mishra. And we'll talk about the other Mishra here in a bit. But yes, Mishra Eminent One, a 5/4 human artificer that costs 2 blue, black, red. He has at the beginning of combat on your turn, create a token that's a copy of target non-creature artifact you control, except its name is Mishra's Warform, and it's a 4/4 construct artifact creature in addition to its other types. It gains haste until end of turn, sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. So that's a pretty spicy effect, and one that you can really use and abuse with the right build around it. Now, actually, I probably should have mentioned as well, this Mishra, as you can tell with the set symbol right there, it's actually in the precons. So this is actually not in the main set. I probably should have mentioned that first. Anyways, it'll be really interesting to see, the deck that they build around this for the precon and what kind of cards come with it, but yeah. There's a lot of spicy things that you can do with this, and some broken things as well. I mean, when it comes to artifacts, yeah, there's plenty of broken things. So commanders that work well with artifacts tend to go in that direction sometimes. Not that you have to build this in a broken way, but of course there are possibilities to do some pretty disgusting things with this one. Now, keep in mind the restrictions with this trigger. Again, this is the beginning of combat. You get this trigger. You get a token that's a copy of a non-creature artifact. That, of course, is very specific. You cannot copy any, other artifact creatures. And, of course, the token that you do get is going to be a 4/4 that, gets haste, so you can swing with it right away, of course. But you do have to sacrifice it at the beginning of that extend step, which, of course, in some circumstances can actually be a good thing. So yeah, this is definitely the kind of commander that can be very artifact-centric and really focus on artifacts that, maybe have some ETBs or LTBs, or, just maybe other benefits with other things that benefit when your artifacts hit the graveyard. So yeah, this commander has a lot of potential, and, as a 3-color commander, and you've got access to some pretty fantastic things, this can definitely be a very powerful and very threatening commander. And yeah, if you are interested in this commander, make sure you check out that link in the description below that's got the list of cards I talked about on this episode. And with that said, well, let's quickly talk about another Mishra. And this one, of course, is not a new card, but an older card from back in the Time Spiral block with Mishra Artificer Prodigy. So yeah, we've only actually seen Mishra one other time, and you might not have even known that this Mishra existed, actually, because, well, although it is a legendary creature and, therefore a commander, it doesn't really see any play at all because, well, it doesn't really work well in commander because it says whenever you cast an artifact spell, you may search your graveyard, hand, and or library for a card the same name as that spell put into play. If you search your library this way, shuffle it. So obviously in other formats, well, you can have up to 4 of, each card. With this one, you can only have 1 of each card in Commander. So, yeah, doesn't work in Commander. Now, okay, I should say there are some really janky builds that you can utilize this, Commander with things like, I believe, Possibility Storm works with it, essentially. But also, you could also utilize something like, Biotransference and a bunch of Shadowborn Apostles if you really want to do that. Sure, there are builds that do work with Mishra, but we finally have one that is usable, in a non-kind of off-the-wall crazy way that, doesn't see a lot of play. Anyways, back to our new Mishra, though, and what kind of cards you might want to consider when you build around it. First up, in the first one that came to my mind was actually Obeka Brute Chronologist, an incredible commander itself, but one that works well in this kind of a deck. Tap, the player whose turn it is may end the turn. Again, Mishra is going to make a token that's a copy of one of your artifacts, and then you have to sacrifice it at the end step, but instead of doing that, you're going to be like, oh, okay, well, that's on the stack, and my turn's over. So instead of actually having to sacrifice that artifact, well, that just gets ignored, and yeah, that's just gone, and now you just get to keep the artifact. So basically, you just keep making more and more tokens throughout the game, and you get to keep those now, which can lead to some really powerful plays. Or should I say, keeping, artifact creature versions of those. You know what I mean. And of course, Sundial the Infinite is another way to utilize this kind of same effect, but yeah, Obeka, Sundial, make sure you're considering those for a build around this Mishra. Next up, unfortunately, there really aren't many populate effects in these colors. Wizards, I love populate. Please, please, more populate, please. Thank you. Anyways, Geared's Belligerents, a determined iteration, are two ways to take advantage of those tokens as well. For example, Geared's Belligerents is going to deal X damage divided as you choose among any number of target creatures. Whenever a creature dealt damage this way dies its turn, populate, which means you get a token that's a copy of a creature token you control. So obviously, after you make the token copy and before you have to sacrifice it, just utilize this. I mean, I guess I should say second main phase, right? Utilize this to take out a creature or two or whatnot and start populating that token. The original artifact creature token is going to go away, but the tokens that you create with the populating will not. They will stick around. So it's a great way to get a lot of extra value out of that. And again, Wizards, more populate effects, please. Thank you. But yeah, determined iteration is another way to take advantage of this too. At the beginning of combat on your turn, populate the token created this way, gains haste, sacrifice to begin the next end step. So essentially, yeah, I mean, just stack your triggers so that you are utilizing Mishra's first, make a copy, of something, and then, populate with this. Now you're going to have to sacrifice this token as well, but still, you get a second copy temporarily that you can again swing out with, get any ETBs, LTBs, or, activations, or whatever you have with that artifact that you are copying. And of course, a really fun way to do this is with Brutoclad Tailcore Engineer, a 4/4 that says creature tokens you control have haste, and more importantly, at the beginning of combat on your turn, create a 2/1 blue mirror artifact creature token, then you may choose a token you control. If you do, each other token you control becomes a copy of that token. So you can turn every single one of your tokens, including this mirror that you're making, and if you're making any other treasures, or food, or other creature tokens, into a token copy of whatever you copied with Mishra, which can get pretty absurd with some of the choices that you have out there. And again, all these other tokens, outside the one that you created with Mishra, are going to stick around. So yeah, you can do some pretty crazy things once you're set up properly. But you can also make even more out of Mishra's trigger with cards like Psionic Resonator and Relentless Assault. Psionic Resonator has pay 2, tap, copy target triggered ability you control. You may choose new targets for the copy. So this, of course, can allow you to get even more triggers off of Mishra to make even more copies, again, of the exact same artifact, or again, multiple artifacts. But yeah, really taking advantage of that can really provide you a lot of extra value throughout the game. Speaking of which, Relentless Assault, or other extra combat cards like this one, well, this one says, untap all creatures that attack this turn after this main phase, the original combat phase, fall original main phase. Again, our brand new Mishra says at the beginning of combat on your turn, that is when that trigger happens. So yeah, now getting an extra combat, you get an extra trigger. And again, you can really take advantage of that trigger a lot with all these extra combat spells. I'm sure there's plenty of ways to go infinite with that too, so have fun with that. But yeah, definitely make sure you are making the most out of this very powerful trigger. Again, you cannot copy creatures, you can't copy artifact creatures, but you can copy non-artifact creatures, and there are some incredibly powerful ones that you're going to want some extra copies of, like, maybe like a Caged Sun. When it enters the battlefield, you choose a color. Creatures you control the chosen color get ++1. Whenever a land's ability causes you to add 1 or more mana of the chosen color, add 1 additional mana of that color. Basically, it's a mana doubler for certain lands, and now, yeah, you can get an extra copy of it as well. I mean, temporary copy, unless you're able to actually, make more copies of this, through populating or whatnot, or Brutoclad. But yeah, you could essentially just say, okay, I mean, my deck runs a bunch of, mountains maybe, so cool. I'll get a lot of extra mana out of my mountains. Or how about something like Panharmonicon? I mean, if your deck is going to have a lot of ETBs, you can really take advantage of them with extra copies of this. If an artifact or creature entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. Again, even just getting a temporary copy of this essentially makes it so your ETBs are just going off and going crazy. But yeah, if you are able to make some permanent copies of this too, good luck opponents when you have that amount of value going on. And speaking of ETBs, well, one of the very first cards that came to my mind when I saw this commander was Coveted Jewel. It has when it enters the battlefield, draw 3 cards, and it can tap to 3 mana of any one color. Now, there is a downside to it that whenever one or more creatures and opponent controls attack you and aren't blocked, that creature draws 3 cards and gains control of Coveted Jewel, untap it. So there is a downside to this, but obviously there is basically no downside to the token copy of it when you are making one of those because, cool, I mean, you get a 4/4, a hasty artifact creature token version of this. You draw 3 cards when this comes into play. You can utilize it right away for mana if you want to. And of course, it's going to be sacrificed at the end of your turn, so your opponents don't get to take it. And when it comes to sacrificing, there are also artifacts that benefit from being sacrificed as well, like Ichor Wellspring. This one has when it enters the battlefield, or when it's been to a graveyard from the battlefield, draw a card. So by making a token copy of this, you are drawing 2 cards. And again, as a very low to the ground, just simple example of how you can really take advantage of this commander's trigger. Yeah, there's a lot you can do with this. And speaking of taking advantage of getting rid of your artifacts, well, yeah, I mean, you've got plenty of great ways to utilize them before you actually have to sacrifice them, even with a card like, Reshape, maybe. Reshape has initial cost to cast a spell, sacrifice an artifact, search live for an artifact card with converted mana cost, extra less on the battlefield, then shuffle your library. So again, you're going to be losing that token copy at some point, so instead of losing it, you can just utilize it with this and go tutor for whatever, perfect artifact you need for the situation that you're in. Speaking of which, in a somewhat similar way, there's Gobble Engineer. When it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for an artifact card, put it into your graveyard, then shuffle your library. And by paying a red and tapping it, you sacrifice an artifact, return target artifact card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So again, you can essentially tutor for whatever artifact you need, in your graveyard. You can get it right back into play by just sacrificing your token copy of your artifact that you're already going to lose. Or you can utilize that token that you're going to lose with something like Braids Arisen Nightmare, which has at the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice an artifact, creature, enchantment, land, or planeswalker. If you do, each opponent may sacrifice a permanent that shares a card type with it. For each opponent who doesn't, that player loses 2 life and you draw a card. So again, stack your triggers properly, but yeah, by sacrificing that artifact creature token, your opponents, you're going to either have to sacrifice an artifact or a creature, or you're going to be drawing some cards and they lose some life. So yeah, that can provide you a lot of card advantage throughout the game, or also just, a way to take out your opponent's things. Or, with all this sacrificing of all these artifacts, Marionette Master or other ways, drain your opponents when they hit the graveyard are going to be great. Marionette Master has Fabricate 3, so it can come into play 3 counters on it, and whenever artifact you control is put in the graveyard from the battlefield, target opponent loses life equal to Marionette Master's power. So every single time you lose one of those artifacts, you are going to be draining an opponent for 4, and yeah, that can add up a lot throughout the game. Again, especially if you can make additional copies of those. Yeah, that can really add up, and your opponents can get taken out quite quickly, well, in a lot of ways with this kind of a deck. Because, of course, like I mentioned earlier, this commander definitely has some combo potential. One very simple combo that actually has a lot of iterations on it is Voltaic Construct and Thran Dynamo. Voltaic Construct has pay 2 untap target artifact creature. Now, normally that wouldn't work with Thran Dynamo, which is just an artifact. It can tap for 3. But with Mishra, again, you just make a copy of Thran Dynamo. Cool. Now I've got an artifact creature that has haste. It can tap for 3. I will tap it for 3. I will utilize 2 of that mana to activate Voltaic Construct's ability to untap my Thran Dynamo creature token thingy. Whatever it is. Anyways, I have 1 extra mana left over. Cool, I'll tap it again. Essentially, every single time you do this, you are gaining an extra mana. You have infinite colorless mana. Yeah, there are plenty of ways to win from there. And of course, in place of Thran Dynamo, there are a lot of other examples of mana rocks that can do the same thing, essentially. But now as this episode is coming to a close, it's time for me to give you my final thoughts on Mishra Eminent One. Yeah, it finally has happened. We finally have, and again, no offense to those of you who have Mishra decks out there. They are, very interesting, very exciting. But again, whereas this Mishra is definitely intended to be a commander, that one definitely was not. Because again, commander is a singleton format. Anyways, This is a very powerful commander, one that of course can do some very broken things, but it's also one that you can take in a couple of different directions, and you can really take advantage of a lot of different things. Again, you can take advantage of your artifacts leaving battlefield, you can take advantage of them entering the battlefield, you can take advantage of, being able to make extra copies of them too, or ending the turn in keeping those copies. So yeah, I think this Mishra has a lot of potential, and I think a lot of players out there are going to be very excited about it. So again, make sure you check out that link in the description below. That's got the list of the cards I talked about in this episode. And of course, make sure you're staying tuned to this channel for the rest of the spoilers today. I believe there's going to be 2 more episodes, so yeah, make sure to look up for those because those are some incredibly spicy cards as well. And with that, the show is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thanks again and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.